Hi, I'm Derek Kashong, and you are now in the stream, and we are actually in the midst of a torrential downpour. If you'll take a look behind me, you will see it is raining and dark outside, but we're going to try to shed some light on some key issues today. We're bringing you stories that are sourced from social media as always, and today, ignored by the global media, how the Tamil minority is coping in post-war Sri Lanka. The civil war there ended 2 years ago, but do old prejudices still exist? Our digital producer Ahmed Shahab Al-Din is here with your feedback. Also joining us on the couch is Ramesh Srinivasan. He's an assistant professor at the University of California in Los Angeles, UCLA. He works in design and media as well as in information studies. He's also done a lot of stuff on the impact of new media on revolutionary movements and economic development. Ramesh, it's so good to have you back in the stream. We understand you were just in Egypt. What took you there?
I mean, it was absolutely fascinating to be there. It's a country that has caught the global attention, and much like some of these other countries in the Arab Spring, we're seeing social media sort of being placed as sort of a causal factor in what ended up happening there. Yet 5% of people in this 85 million person country are active on Facebook and Twitter. So what gives? What brings people from the street, the masses, the laborers, the poorer people out onto the streets, and how do those networks of the street link with the networks of the digital world?
I'm so glad we're talking about this. We're going to get deeper into that later, because I always question when they say Facebook revolution. I'm like, revolutions have been happening long before Facebook existed. Great to have you here. Also, if you've got stories that you want to share with us, we always want to know what our online community is following. So if you see something cool, tweet it to us. Use the hashtag AJStream.
My name is Toussaint Webster. I'm interning in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, and I'm in the stream.
How is Sri Lanka's Tamil minority coping 2 years after the end of a devastating civil war? That story seems to have fallen off the international media's radar. The Sri Lankan government promised reconciliation after defeating Tamil rebels who'd fought for nearly 30 years for an independent Tamil state. So today, we're examining whether Sri Lanka has been able to move beyond its painful past, or is it still caught up in the same divisions that triggered the conflict in the first place? Let's take a look at this video, which shows a little bit of the status of some people some Tamils in Sri Lanka right now. Now, many say that nothing has changed for these people. Refugees are still languishing in camps, and there's very little opportunity for Tamils in the northeast, where they are in fact a majority of the population. Not only are people in the Tamil regions of Sri Lanka speaking about these issues, however, the Tamil diaspora is also getting involved in. We saw a very interesting music video that was produced by diaspora members, and this is one of many. Let's take a quick look. Now, we also want to show you one other clip, and this is a very interesting one. This is from a controversial video that was done by Britain's Channel 4, and it actually talks about some of the atrocities that have been happening in the region. The film is called Sri Lanka's Killing Fields. Now, some of the footage is very graphic. We're not going to show you much, but just to give you a little bit of an insight into what's happening.
But government forces were not the only ones showing a brutal disregard for civilians.
Now, what the narrator is speaking about here is the fact that there have been allegations of war crimes committed by both the Sri Lankan government and by Tamil rebel fighters. The Sri Lankan government has actually questioned the authenticity of the footage in this particular piece. Joining us now via Skype to discuss these matters further is blogger Indi Samarajiva, who lives in Colombo. He writes for the Sri Lankan newspaper The Sunday Leader and has founded a blogging community of around 1,200 members. Also joining us now from London is Sri Lankan Tamil blogger and activist Kumaravadivel Guruparan, who grew up in Jaffna. He lost several members of his family in Sri Lanka's civil war. Good to have you both in the stream. Indi, let's actually begin with you. What is the status of reconciliation with Tamils in Sri Lanka now?
Well, I think you've you frame the debate in terms of Tamils and Sinhalese, but I think it's really about Sri Lankans. There are Sri Lankans of all stripes that have issues. We have Muslims, we have rich and poor, and there are these divisions as well. So the question is, how do we reconcile as Sri Lankans? Now, I think post-war, we're moving beyond the whole Tamil-Sinhala division and the whole, like, are you blowing us up, division? And we're saying, okay, how is our education system working? Are our kids functioning in school? How is health? We have, like, Sri Lankan issues. So I think it comes from the outside media that you're asking, like, are Tamils and Sinhalese being reconciled? But we have other divisions as well, and we have other things that unite us. And I do think we're moving beyond that simply because we don't have constant terrorism.
Let me ask you then, Guru, would you agree with that characterization?
I think we have to be very careful about asserting something that doesn't attach to the type of real situation that the Tamils and the minority and the other minorities that are facing back in Sri Lanka. I think it's wrong to be jingoistic about a Sri Lankan identity which actually does not accommodate its minorities. The question is whether the Tamils feel that they are being included as Sri Lankans, and that's what the conflict is about. To talk about other divisions, as India did, is right. I mean, he's right to point out that there are other divisions, but there is no one who denies, and it's surprising that India would claim this, that there is a very serious ethnic conflict in Sri Lanka. Of course, the hostilities dimension of it, the fact that there were two warring parties, that dimension is over. But the reasons for the conflict, the fundamentals of the conflict remain very much the same. And 2 years after the war is over, none of these dynamics have changed. So talking about education, there are specific issues that Tamils in Sri Lanka face as Tamils relating to education. You take the economy. There are issues that Tamils face in Sri Lanka because they are Tamils, because they are targeted as Tamils in Sri Lanka. So there is an ethnic dimension to the different problems that Indy himself identifies. And
let me give Indy an opportunity to respond to that. Indy, is Guru correct in this?
I think Tamil people definitely have issues. Now, my question is, how do we solve those issues? And I'm saying we solve them by making it a Sri Lankan issue. Because if you say it's a Tamil issue, then really, like, what stake do I have in that? What stake do Muslims have in that? What stake do other people have in that? If we say, okay, it's a Sri Lankan issue. We want equality for Sri Lankans. Then suddenly it's something everybody can participate in and everyone can do together. Because post-war, we've discovered that we all have issues. We have, like, traffic issues, right? We have, like, job issues. So these are things which unite us. And if we're together, we can do them together.
So I have a question for both of you. My name is Ramesh Srinivasan. I'm actually of Tamil descent, but I'm Indian of Tamil descent. The Tamil uses, the Tamil diasporic uses, diaspora immigrants all over the world, their uses of social media were considered critical to sort of fueling some of the Tamil agenda, both back in the day, dating back 10 to 15 years, as well as currently. So do you both have ideas or thoughts on whether the Tamil diaspora and its continued use of social media is a productive part of this, reconciliation process in Sri Lanka?
Guru?
Either of you want to jump in?
Yeah, I mean, I'll answer that question in a more general terms. The fact that the Tamil diaspora is an organized force, that it takes part actively in the debates relating to what happens in Sri Lanka and generally with regard to the Tamil plight, is needed. That's an activism that we can't deny them of. But the point here is that whatever activism that the Tamil diaspora is involved in should not be the reason why you deny the existence of a problem of problems that Tamils face back home. I think that's important too. I mean, one of the things that the Sri Lankan government and people in the south have particularly become tuned to do is to say that the Tamil diaspora, just because the Tamil diaspora has invested itself in a cause, tries to link the Tamil diaspora into that cause and tries to, and because of certain sort of pathologies that the Tamil diaspora has been associated with, try to delegitimize the whole issue. I think there are problems with the way the Tamil diaspora conducts itself. That's something for another debate. But the question is, are there issues in Sri Lanka that Tamils face as Tamils? And I think what Indy just said in his response to my earlier response is deeply problematic, because Kashmiris, for example, would assert that they are facing issues because they are Kashmiris. And Kashmiris will have a problem to say that. It won't be a response to say that what the problem that Kashmiris face is because they face them as Indians. You would say the same for the Scottish. You would say the same for the Quebecians. You would say the same for the Catalanians.
Let's give India an opportunity to respond. Indy, is it easy to say that these are Sri Lankan issues and not Tamil issues if you yourself are not Tamil?
It seems it's frozen.
Well, I'm not a very good Sinhalese, if that makes you feel any better. I barely speak Sinhala. Is it fair? I don't know. We could talk about the problem. Okay, like let's say in social media, this guy at Tamil Diaspora on Twitter, I follow him, but he talks about the problem all the time. So it's like war crimes, whatever. But then I saw some kids from the Mosaic Institute in Canada, and they were talking about like, well, we have this problem, but what's the solution? And for me, the solution is unity, is working together as Sri Lankans to solve Tamil problems, gender issues, together, because you need a broad base to solve these problems. So I understand the problem. I'm not denying it's not there. I'm saying, how do we work it out? And I'm saying together.
Indy, you mentioned Tamil Diaspora, the particular user on Twitter. Well, we have a tweet that he just tweeted in to our show saying, recently Lanka and Tamil lawmakers were severely beaten up by troops, and he's linking to an AFP article right here. I just wanted to ask a question to you or to Guru, actually. Let's just put it to you. Mike here is also saying the Tamil diaspora doesn't donate a single dollar for the welfare of the Tamils in Sri Lanka. So social media aside, is there a divide between Tamils in Sri Lanka and the diaspora?
I think this dichotomy is overplayed. Let me just respond to what you just said about the diaspora not contributing back home. You look at the development, so-called developmental works that are happening in the north and east. I come from Jaffna in Sri Lanka, and I recently came to the UK. I only came in September 2010, so I very much define myself as a local Tamil. If you look at the developmental activities, the so-called developmental activities that are taking place in the north and east, they are taking place under a structure of fear and intimidation, where there is extreme control from the center by the government in Colombo in terms of anything that happens in the north and east. So unless you subscribe to the government's view of how you approach the question of economic development, how you approach the question of a political solution, it is impossible for Tamils living in the diaspora to work with. So the only way that the Tamil diaspora can work in Sri Lanka is to sign up to the government's agenda. And this is for asking for something that is morally and politically impossible. So that's the issue that we
Let me get Indy to respond to this. So Indy, the government made some significant promises in the wake of the war. Has it delivered? Are Tamils being treated equally, or are they facing prejudices still to this day, in your opinion? Okay, we've lost Indy for just a minute, but I want to bring this back to you quickly, Ramesh, because the issue at hand, they both got strong views, but the question is what's happening on the ground, and do the Tamils have equal opportunity in the United Nations?
So what's happening here, and there's actually a shared space between what both of them are saying, which could be really productive to focus on. On the one hand, there's this point that the Tamil diaspora is kind of keeping the movement honest in a way, even after the end of the Civil War, so-called end of the Civil War. So that's actually fueling this kind of global attention, even though it's not being covered much by mainstream media. However, the point that Indy is making is really important, which is that this is a place-based, this is a locally based issue, right? These are issues related to a particular country with a particular nation with a particular history and a particular economy. So to sort of think that all of this is about diaspora ignores the fact that these people are all on some level Sri Lankans. But so how do we work across those things? That's the key.
We have a tweet coming in that's kind of taking a broader look at this from Lenguara, saying this compulsion in pointing out ethnic differences in any issue, but in this one particularly, is always a distraction from the more vital issues. Do you think it's important to point out the ethnic differences?
See, it's only important insofar as that a lot of the sort of energy into the movement is happening through these sort of social media. But the ethnic differences are legitimate. I mean, they were the source of a lot of these tensions and problems, right? And they were about, they were related to class, and they were related to education levels. And there were waves of refugees coming out of Sri Lanka who were poor refugees who had to deal with many of these issues.
Well, let me bring this back to Guru actually on the same point. Guru, how do you think the Sri Lankan government has done so far in reintegrating Tamils into the country?
And what could it do better?
Yeah, that's a huge question. But let me quickly respond to what just Ramesh said. I mean, I do think, I mean, to talk about the Tamils as Sri Lankans is important, I agree. But the question is that the Sri Lankan identity does not accommodate the Tamils. Now, what needs to be done about it? What needs to be done is the Tamils, since independence, have been asking for the state structure to be reformed so that power is shared by the constituent communities of Sri Lanka together. That this is not just an exercise where the Sinhalese from Colombo control state power, but state power is shared. I mean, that really is the issue. And on this, there is quite a consensus that the government has made very little progress or no progress at all. Now, on the question of rehabilitation and reconciliation, let me just give you a few figures. Now, from Kokkalai to Chundikulam, which is in Mullathievu district, where the last phase of the war took place, there has been the fishing restrictions still apply, whereas Sinhalese from the south are allowed to come and engage in fish and prawn farming. For example, in Vaunathivu, in Batticaloa, for example, 3,000 acres of land belonging to Tamils have been given over to Sinhalese home guards to engage in cultivation. Similarly, 1,300 acres of land in Kilinochchi, in Kanagara and Kulam, these are all in Kilinochchi district, has been given over is being militarized. I mean, there are major concerns relating to national security-led settlement.
Guru, unfortunately, we've run out of time in this segment, but you've given us a lot of food for thought. I'm going to direct people to know they can find out more information about this on our website. But first, I want to thank you for joining us and giving this insight.
Thanks. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Now, as I mentioned, you can go to our website, stream.aljazeera.com, where you're going to find the videos that we showed here, in addition to links to a number of other stories, including this one about post-war Sri Lanka. You can learn more about how both the Sinhalese and the Tamils are struggling to overcome a legacy of war and ethnic division.
Eritrea is the only African country to have no privately owned news media, but it's also among the world's leading sources of asylum seekers. So about tens of thousands escape President Isaias Afwerki's rule every year. So what do you do to escape a country where President's security apparatus is tightly controlling virtually every move you make? Well, you join a football team, compete in tournaments outside your country, and then simply never return. Now, this is what a dozen people for a local football club in Eritrea have done after being knocked out of a tournament in Tanzania. We received this tweet from Eri Revolt September 1 saying Eritrean footballers go missing, linking to this article in the Global Post, which chronicles this being the fourth time that Eritrean footballers have absconded and not shown up for the return flight after a tournament. Now, the same Twitter user that sent us this story actually sent us this video right here. So I'm just going to play some of the video. This is from 2009. And it's a video that's chronicling the last time this happened, showing members of the team that did not show up for their flights after the very same tournament when 17 of the team's 20 members were absconded. And it's worth mentioning that in Eritrea, playing sports is actually one of the only ways that people can, you know, kind of escape the poverty.
Wait, Ahmed, are you saying at that time that only 3 members of the team actually went back home?
Exactly.
The other 17 of the 20 ran away?
Exactly. And just quickly to, you know, the Tanzania's Home Affairs Ministry said that the 13 footballers that missed their flights yesterday went directly to the UN High Commissioner Refugee to actually ask for protection. So just quickly, we always ask you to share stories with us, but today we're doing something a little bit different, telling you how to be in the stream, quite literally. So here's how to do it.
Hi, I'm Ben Connors, and I work for the stream. One of my jobs is to make these little I'm in the stream videos, but I need your help. Whoever you are, wherever you are, we want you to send us a video. Tell us your name, something interesting, and then say, I'm in the stream. Keep it short, upload the video to YouTube, then tweet us the link at AJStream, and you can wind up here on Al Jazeera.
Now, as we said earlier in the show, Ramesh just got back from Egypt. Ramesh, tell us a little bit about what you learned while you were there.
So it was absolutely fascinating. I spent several weeks in Egypt in contact with a wide variety of people, not just the people that we give a lot of attention to in the West, people across classes, education levels, people who are technologists, people who are also political aspirants, but also working class laborers. And I was trying to talk to them about their relationship to the political climate in Egypt, both historically, during the 18 days before Mubarak stepped down, And currently, as you all know, things are quite turbulent as we speak in Egypt. And I was trying to understand where social media fits in this equation, and I realized that social media works in ways with particular small sets of the population, but there are people who are able to rally the masses, get the masses out into the street, and they have all sorts of tactics of doing this, and yet also be able to interpret the networks of social media so they can impact journalism, they can impact funding, they can impact all sorts of other types of support, right?
Let me ask you a
So
question.
how you work
because,
both.
Well, one of the things I wonder is you have a population of people that are online, a small section of the overall population, and these are people who are typically going to be better educated and of a higher socioeconomic class. How is it that they were able to capture the imagination of a broader mass of people?
It's because they were united around the idea that this regime had to go, right? So the grievances of poorer people in this country are very different than the grievances of the wealthier people who are more social media users. They were worried about the price of tomatoes. They were worried about getting a job. And so that unitedness links itself perfectly to the logic of social media, where I can join a group against Mubarak, or the April 6th movement, which is a youth, more activist, politically kind of intense movement, can link to the We Are All Khaled Saeed movement. So they link perfectly, and some of these street organizers also link to these movements.
Ramesh, isn't it true that this is all really about the fact that it was a popular uprising more than a political one or a religious one? I mean, we saw the people who were using these tools like Twitter and Facebook actually take to the streets and use field tests to try and mobilize the masses who aren't connected.
Right. And so and their impact on journalism in particular is absolutely critical, right? But we have to be really careful, because a number of folks told me, both on and off the record, that they're sourcing stories directly from Twitter without independently verifying those leads.
Right.
On top of it, I was watching where people were who were on Twitter at these protests, and sometimes they're very much at the back, right? Because they're wealthier, they are on their phones, and it's hard to be on your phone, doing all this Twitter stuff, and versus being in the front lines.
When somebody's, throwing tear gas at you.
Yep.
Exactly. And so, but this is the next question. When you look at what happens moving forward, I mean, you have a popular uprising. People had significant concerns about the regime, but don't those core concerns start to create a fracturing where, the interests of the poor, the interests of the middle class, interests of different religious groups or different political philosophies start to actually come out, and it changes the nature of the movement?
And that's certainly the hope here, right? There's still an alignment which works, again, perfectly well with social media and with the logic of the street against the Supreme Council of Armed Forces, or they call SCAF. But the idea of working out all one's different positions and developing consensus is extremely problematic to this day in Egypt.
But here's my question. Currently, we see that there's a wide coalition kind of, inspired by the youth that's really bringing Salafists and the Muslim Brotherhood together and more liberal and conservative people together. So as Derek said, moving forward, I mean, as Harris Alisik is tweeting and saying social media is just a tool, which is part of the point you made, isn't it a powerful tool in terms of bringing people together, even if it's just a minority of the population, the others can catch up?
Yeah, it brings people together, but insofar as we understand how leaders who are able to speak to masses are brought together via social media, those are the stories we need to tell. But we really need to tell the stories of people who understand how to work and rally the masses, because there's so many things that happen there, like people leaving the street out of Jummah, the mosque prayer, or on January 28th, starting in these labor, working class neighborhoods and going on the streets to Tahrir. Those types of logics work very well with the masses
15
there.
seconds, final question. Did technology make this revolution different from others?
It absolutely affected the shape and the timing of this revolution. It would have happened otherwise, probably much more slowly, but it had an absolutely profound effect on the shape of what we saw.
Ramesh, it is excellent to have you here. We're going to continue this conversation online. We're going to talk about some other things as well. Ramesh, Ahmed, great to see you both. Join this conversation with us online at stream.aljazeera.com. You can use the hashtag AJStream to keep in touch with us. Remember, at 19:25 every day, we have our pre-show, so you can join the conversation prior to this broadcast as well. We're going to go live to the website right now. We will see you online.